Welcome into another edition of New Track Record Podcast from the WELT studios. Caleb Hatch, Justin Kinney with you. Beautiful Friday here in Fort Wayne as we record on April 18th. And we'll talk Long Beach. We'll talk IMS Open Test coming next week, which we'll do a recap of for next week's show. A lot to dive into, but before we get into it, this is the first real, truly nice spring day we've had.
By gosh, it's very nice outside. Over 80 degrees.
And
right
yet
now.
You're wearing a sweatshirt. Are you wearing sweatpants too? Or
yeah, I have sweatpants
track
on,
pants,
track
basically?
Pants. Yeah. I told you before we started, my office at work, I have no windows. It may as well be a jail cell. And so I don't get any natural light or...
Well, jail cells have windows.
Yeah, I mean, some of them, I guess. I'm basically in solitary, is what you could say. Solitary confinement. So no windows. And it just takes the building a long time to heat up or cool down. So it'll be a good week of decent weather before it's warm inside. So yeah, I overdressed, that's for sure.
So you essentially work in an isolated...
Yes.
Complex,
isolated environment.
Yeah,
and I always have to ask you, how is it outside?
It
looks nice when I.
It was great.
Yeah. So
we took the dog and the baby for a walk after we ate lunch. Just in the neighborhood.
Nice,
super nice. It did sprinkle briefly, which was really weird.
Randomly?
Yeah, I mean very randomly, but. Yeah, no, it's quite nice. Shorts on, T-shirt. I got my retro Indy 500 shirt on.
Very nice, 1990 or 1989.
89, yeah.
Yes, the 73rd running.
Yeah, my birth year. So that's why.
There you go. I think my most this is adulting. You get really excited when you're able to open the windows at home.
Yes. Well, I got to have the sunroof open in the car on the way here.
How about that? See? So I was
excited for that.
I left too early today to open the windows. Nobody else was up, so I made sure to tell my wife when she texted me later, make sure you open the windows. You got to get fresh air in. Mm-hmm. It's one of those adulting things.
But it's too hot because it's over 80.
Well, the thing is, the house will get all warm and then I'll shut it up because it's supposed to be back in the 50s and rainy over the weekend, of course. But it's supposed to be nice, last I saw, for the open test. But It is Indiana and it is several days away. So you never know what's going to happen. But mid-70s and dry, I mean... Could that be a benefit to maybe race day-ish weather? Maybe?
Perhaps.
Because we always talk about the open test and, okay, it's 53 and and cloudy. That's not going to be indicative of late May. But if we have mid-70s, upper 70s and dry, maybe that'll give some comparable race conditions, particularly as they try to figure out the hybrid for the first time at Indianapolis.
And we'll dive into a little bit of hybrid talk
well. We will.
On this week's show. But first, we will recap the 50th Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach. Now, again, not the 50th IndyCar edition.
Correct.
But 50th overall. What's funny is, I think on Sunday here in Fort Wayne, it was warmer in Fort Wayne than it was in Long Beach. I mean, they dealt with actual... overcast, cloudy weather, marine layer every morning.
Well, Buxton was saying,
what
was it on the warm-up? He was like, I was told it was going to be warm and sunny here. And he said, it's more indicative of what I get at home in England. But the sun eventually came out.
It did. And as always, Long Beach looks amazing on TV. And we'll dive into Fox's coverage through our three things. But congrats, Kyle Kirkwood, or Kirkwood, if you know, for winning his second Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach in just 3 years.
Yeah.
Impressive. We knew Andretti would be quick. I picked the wrong Andretti car with Colton Herta, who wound up 7th, but overall their 7th win as a team for Andretti in the last 15 Long Beach races.
It's the track.
Kirkwood twice, Rossi twice, Herta once. You had Hunter-Reay way back, and I'm missing one other. It was Conway. Mike Conway randomly won in 2011, I think.
It is it's the best track for Andretti over the last decade of 15 years, you could argue. And while Kyle Kirkwood took his starting position on pole and effectively dominated the race, it was Colton Herta who really faded at the jump and never really was a factor. And we talked about it. We've talked about it at length, and we mentioned it to each other after qualifying is, okay, here's another opportunity for an Andretti or a McLaren team car or the team to have a great chance at getting a win, because you only have limited chances with Penske and Ganassi effectively winning 2/3 of the races every year. You had to maximize your chances. Andretti didn't do it at St. Pete with Colton Herta. They didn't do it again with Herta, but they were able to get the win with Kirkwood at Long Beach.
And Kirkwood, it was a stellar performance. Palou was pressuring him for a bit, and Kirkwood pulled away. I mean, to be pulling away from Alex Palou is impressive nonetheless, but he still finishes second. So he goes first, second.
The devastating weekend for Alex Palou to finish second and effectively, what is it, 1-2 now, Palou, Kirkwood? We're not talking about, I'm not looking at it, but what is it, 1-2 Palou, yes. Kirkwood in the point standing. So it wasn't, while Palou didn't win, he did perfectly fine in terms of the points championship. And
as an event, I mean, outstanding. You had reserve seats sold out again. I think it's the third year in a row. Great coverage from Fox. We'll dive into that.
I mean, all-time attendance record, right?
Yes, all-time. It was the modern era, which they are saying, 2008 to present, post-reunification attendance record. So that's also super impressive. Look, the events on the schedule, I mean, St. Pete seems to be growing every year, not to the level of a Long Beach, but it's doing well. We're going to not talk about thermal. Long Beach doing well. Barber always does well attendance-wise as long as the weather cooperates. Now, coming up in a couple of weeks, and obviously we know the Indy 500 is doing well as well. So, yeah, big events. Unfortunately, on track, and then in terms of the media aspect, a little bit to be desired so far, and we'll dive into that. So let's start with our three things. I think my biggest takeaway was Fox's coverage over the course of the weekend was outstanding. They introduced some new features. The Fox driver's eyes, they called it, was incredible. I mean, it looked like you were watching or playing a video game with the in-helmet. It was better than a visor cam or a helmet cam. I mean, this was a unique perspective that I thought just looked outstanding. Marshall Pruitt did a really good video that he posted on socials about, how this works. The camera's tiny. I mean, it's not adding an insane amount of weight. This is a feature that, they had it for Kirkwood, for example. So, how lucky to have the race winner. But you look at things that IndyCar can do moving forward. Having this camera for every car would be great. Having an in-car camera for every car would be great, but they're making progress. And I thought Fox did an outstanding job, not just highlighting Long Beach. The graphics seemed like they added a little extra pizzazz. The track preview was great.
Yeah, I really love the track preview.
The starting grid with the drivers introing themselves and adding their IndyCar on there. These are little things, but man, I thought Fox did an outstanding job. We said we thought they'd crush it. They did. And I think you have to be excited about what's to come over the next several weeks with their coverage leading up to the Indianapolis 500.
The question was heading into Long Beach weekend was Fox going to deliver not just cleaning up some of the things it needed to after the first two races, but also present Long Beach in a way in which it should as the second biggest race on the calendar. And you and I agree, one of the 10 biggest races in the world, regardless of formula. And they knocked it out of the park. It was tremendous from the Friday warm-up or the Friday practice and all that, all the way through the warm-up on Sunday morning and having little Al on the couch with him and crowning him, so to speak, for his 6 wins at Long Beach. It was really, really well presented and delivered for sure, at least the presentation. And we'll talk about the rating here in a little bit. But when we look at the growth or lack thereof of the ratings through the first 3 weeks, I think Fox has done everything and more that can be expected for IndyCar, and they really delivered. every week I like Will Buxton more and more. I love the energy he brings. And he's just, it's kind of cool to see him react to some of the track, particularly like Long Beach. He had never been there and experiencing the event and all that. So it was really cool, and kudos to Fox, and they're just going to keep delivering. I mean, the driver's eye, like you mentioned, the clarity of it for being able to see the steering wheel and the data on the steering wheel, seeing when the drivers were looking in their rear view mirrors, even in practice when I think they were comparing maybe a Will Power driving around and just how, maybe it was McLaughlin, in terms of how locked in that car was, and then going to Pato O'Ward and just kind of bouncing all over the place, and the vibrations that he faced, and Pato was battling that all weekend. It was those kind of nuances that was really, really, really cool.
I mean, this is not just the NV and U.S. Motorsports having this feature. I would say is an NV, even compared to F1. Like F1 doesn't even have something like this that they utilize, right? Like, am I crazy?
I mean, F1 has the in-car camera.
Yeah, but I'm talking the driver's eye.
I don't think it's
type
in
thing.
the driver's eye. Yeah.
And if IndyCar can continue to roll this out to success, I mean, this is a leg up in your production. We talk about all the time about having all the races on network TV, but if your production also goes above what you can get on NASCAR or F1 or sports cars or whatever, that's a leg up on the competition. I think that is critical for IndyCars to have these little things that Fox is providing, and to give them something that is unique and different for viewers, for fans, and a way to attract new people to the sport. I mean, this is the kind of thing that you hope drivers post more clips of, and they've done it so far, more clips of, though, on social media to kind of generate some interest and, get people who are the quote-unquote casual fan more involved.
Especially when there's excitement to be shown through the driver's eye, whether it's a pass, whether it's a
crash in front of them.
I mean, yeah. It's just a unique perspective that I think Fox is going to continue to utilize more and more. So,
and this for the Indy 500 is going to be unbelievable.
Absolutely. And you'll get the sense, just like you did even at Long Beach, with the sense of how rough portions of the track are, you're going to get a sense of the speed at Indianapolis with the driver's eye. For sure.
So Fox, big winner for me across the weekend. I know the TV rating's not there. We'll dive into that later. But in terms of the presentation and the improvement, and they clearly worked out the kinks from earlier in the season. Yes, there wasn't as much hybrid stuff, and I guess I kind of agree, and maybe this is part of a larger conversation later. I don't know how much the hybrid's really changing the racing on track or attracting casual viewers. So I think Fox is right to maybe shy away from some of that hybrid coverage. But all in all, A+ to Fox. It was outstanding coverage through the weekend. We didn't have any weird glitches.
Nope. And I mentioned to you earlier, as I finished up Formula One in Bahrain, they had a timing and scoring issue that lasted about 10 laps on the broadcast. So, see, it happens everywhere, I guess. Not a complete loss of power, but a loss of timing and scoring.
Yeah.
So
it happens.
It happens.
All right. What's your number one takeaway?
Well, I kind of covered this earlier, but Andretti maximizing the opportunity, at least one of their drivers winning the race. When they qualified and had a front row lockout, you felt like, okay, my first thought was, how's Andretti going to screw this up? Unfortunately, because that kind of just goes along with really largely their issues over the last couple of years, is who's going to make a mistake, whether it's the driver, whether it's the pit crew, whether it's the strategy. And we saw it bite Colton Herta, who quickly faded after starting on the front row, but Kyle Kirkwood did not. And it just seems to be a track where everything seems to come together, not just for Andretti, but for Kyle Kirkwood. It fits his driving style for whatever reason, and him winning the second Long Beach Grand Prix. So the chances of for every other team of beating Penske and Ganassi through the year is minimal. You have maybe 5 or 6 races that you have a chance to knock off one of the big two. Andretti had an opportunity at St. Pete. They threw it away. They had an opportunity at Long Beach and converted. So for me, when you look at Andretti trying to take that next step and be a real championship contender, they have to pick up these wins when they're able to, and then also maybe steal a couple additional ones as well. But they were able to close this one out, and the Andretti team as a whole did really, really well over the weekend.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you had all three cars, right, make the Fast Six. Is that right?
All three cars started in the top five.
And I get that Herta faded to 7th and Ericsson
faded to 12th.
Had an issue, faded to 12th. But the speed that they have, and I said this going in last week, I was like, look, I expect, and again, I chose the wrong Andretti car, but they're always so good there. This is by far their best track. And the results prove that again on Sunday. I think their street course package is solid. Obviously, you need to be mistake-free and you need to be consistent, and that's always the question mark. I mean, their driver lineup, I would think, pound for pound across the tracks is, I mean, it was probably a 1B to Penske.
Yeah.
In terms of just the driver, I mean, it's better than Ganassi when you look at all three. Obviously, Ganassi has two of the best 5 or 6 drivers in the series, but...
And we'll talk about
we will talk about his
bit.
performance. Yeah. But all in all, yes, it was a good weekend for Andretti, and I think this is what we expect from that team, right?
Yes, we just need to see that elsewhere.
Correct. Besides Long Beach,
right? That's what we're saying. It's great that they're owning Long Beach, but they got to do it elsewhere as well. What's your number 2?
My number 2. You mentioned his name. Let's talk about 2 drivers in particular. 2 drivers that had 2 outstanding races on Sunday. You had Kyffin Simpson, who had the fastest race lap, finishing in 10th, improving from 17th, his first career top 10. And then Stingray Robb, who I believe tied his best career finish with a 9th. I think he was 9th at Gateway. Was that last year?
Is that correct? So.
But he went from 19th to 9th. Both those guys, and Stingray Robb led laps.
He did.
To the point that I have a stat, if I can find it, and I have some breaking news that I will get to after we do our 3 things while we record, because it involves a little Google Translate, so I'm kind of working on that.
Okay.
But really fascinating stuff in terms of schedule developments for the future for IndyCar. But if I can find the stat for Stingray Robb, who Marshall Pruitt had a really good write-up on Robb's approach going to the season. You'll recognize one of the names in this article, but he's apparently utilizing a driver coach and was in England the other week, working on his craft. And the driver coach is Rob Wilson. In fact, Rob went over to England recently, and then he also is getting lessons from, do you remember this name? Adam Carroll, drove for Andretti briefly. Yeah. To his timing stand as a coach on race weekends. So
nice. That's
where you're seeing the improvement is, look, he's just getting some outside help. Now, Rob Wilson has worked with the young Juan Pablo Montoya and Marco Andretti. For Andretti, that was the year he finished in 5th place in the standings back in 2013, his best IndyCar season in terms of overall championship results. So props to Stingray Robb for finding a way to get better, and it's clearly paying dividends. You go from St. Pete, where he's in the way, to at Long Beach, where he's not only finishing top 10, but he's leading laps. He led 12, and he was a legitimate factor if the yellows fared better for him. So good for him. And as I continue to search for this crazy stat, which I will find eventually. But in terms of laps led count for Stingray, it kind of goes to show the development he has made. Here it is. He's led 4 times as many laps as Joseph Newgarden, Will Power, and Colton Herta combined. Now, that's just for this year.
Well, through 3 races. I mean, the key for Stingray Robb and for his long-term future in IndyCar is making runs like we saw on Sunday regular. And I'm not talking about leading a significant amount of laps. This is a 9th place finish, and that's great, but he started the season with a 21st and a 23rd. So these, I would say, consistent top 15s is where Stingray Robb needs to get. And I think you look at Kyffin Simpson, and you think, he's bringing a mega check, which helps, but you think long-term for him to be a Ganassi driver, he needs to deliver regular top 10s, I would feel. Started the season off 18th, 15th, now 10th. He's making strides for sure in each of the first 3 races of the season, but we need to see that consistency. I mean, you look at his best finish last year was 14th, 13th at Milwaukee, I think. So first career, 12th, at St. Pete. So first career top 10 for Kiffin Simpson. These need to be regular occurrences for Kiffin Simpson, considering the team he's racing for.
Also in year 2, I mean, you need to be making progress, and
exactly,
we're seeing progress. Fastest race lap for him, which he took away from, ironically, Stingray Robb, who was running at the front in clean air. And look, we saw Stingray off sequence lead last year right at Indy, but I mean, this was the strategy that, along with Christian Lundgaard, proved to be correct if you were further back in the pack. They made it work, and congrats to Juncos. I mean, this is a much needed result after struggling, early on the season. So for both those guys, I was impressed what they did Sunday.
Very good, impressive drives. We'll see if they can make this a regular occurrence.
Your number 2.
Well, let's talk about seatbelts and Team Penske.
Yes.
Joseph Newgarden finishes dead last, 27th, and finishes like this just doom you in the championship. And it's happened before for Joseph Newgarden in the sense that when he doesn't finish towards the front, he finishes towards the back, it seems like. There's no middle of the road, at least in the last couple of years, it feels like. Joseph Newgarden, multiple issues with his seatbelt, and it just apparently was just a coincidence considering what happened to Will Power late last year, but still just devastating for Joseph Newgarden. He didn't have much speed to begin with, started 15th, but these are the races and the results that are the difference at the end of the year, whether you're in the championship picture, in the top 3, and in the top 5 and 6, is throwing in a 27th place finish, considering how steady Alex Palou is all the time. So this was a bigger thing for me, and I don't want to make it a big deal because we don't want to talk championship until after the Indy 500, but at the same time, 27th at any point of the season is really going to be difficult to overcome. Yes. And this was just happenstance. And basically and they mentioned on the broadcast at the hairpin, like your arm has to go all the way down, that maybe it makes contact with a belt and can unlatch it. And we saw that with Joseph Newgarden not once, but twice, finishing dead last at Long Beach.
All right, so
Your 3?
Penske. Well, I want to say more on Penske because it's not just a belt issue. You've had Will Power really struggle in qualifying, and Hickey 93 pointed this out. Will Power, this goes back to 2022 in terms of his qualifying struggles to start the season. So it's not been a good start qualifying wise. You look at the results. I mean, just the belt mistake, the hybrid overheating for McLaughlin, right, at Thermal.
Right.
It's not been a good start to the season. And, I get maybe on the surface people say, well, Cindric stepped down. It's like, no, he's still ahead of the IndyCar operation.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with IndyCar.
Has nothing to do with that change.
That's him not worrying about IMSA and NASCAR and stuff. So through 3 races, each Penske driver has one finish of 26th or worse. Will Power has been 26th. Scott McLaughlin and Joseph Newgarden each have last place finishes. McLaughlin at Thermal, Newgarden at Long Beach. So all 3 of them have been victims at one time or another, whether their mistake or someone else's. Not a good start.
No.
So 0 wins.
9th, 10th.
0 wins, 1 podium.
1 pole.
1 pole and 3 finishes of 26th or 27th.
Yeah, it's not been good. And look, I get they'll be fast at Indy, but in terms of the season-long championship, you have results that bad already.
You're already chasing it, right?
Yes. Not only are you chasing it, but for all 3 drivers, is it safe to essentially rule them out because of the consistency required to win the title?
I'm not there yet, but I think another 26th or 27th could be enough to doom a driver.
I mean, championship winners the last several years, like you can't have you have one finish worse than like 15th, you're pretty much doomed the way it's been the last couple of years.
With how Alex Palou is.
And even when Will Power won the title in 22, right? I mean, he was so consistent. So if consistency is required, the boomer bust that we see from Penske on race weekends, that's not going to get it done.
Well, I mean, you look at Scott McLaughlin last year that was disqualified and finished last.
Yeah,
and was still...
Newgarden and McLaughlin were, and Power too for that matter, were doomed from the start.
Yeah, but if you look at it, I mean, Alex Palou...
But that was their own doing. Let's not...
Yeah, no, for sure.
I mean, let's not say it was an external thing. That was an internal team issue.
Alex Palou's lowest finish last year was a 23rd at Iowa 1. If you look at Colton Herta, who was runner-up in the championship, he had a 23rd at Indianapolis. So it's not altogether bad to have one of them. Two of them, though, I think. So that's the thing. I think for Penske right now is.
But like, okay, McLaughlin finished third in the championship, 8 points behind Herta. Imagine if St. Pete doesn't happen. It's a totally different thing.
Right? No, it's true. I mean,
and Power was fourth.
So I think you have
where he lost 10 points, right? But kept his position at St. Pete. That's the way I understand it.
Right.
So he gets those 10 points back. He's ahead of McLaughlin, moves up a spot in the championship. And then Newgarden, obviously, I mean, he had other issues beyond just push to pass gate.
I mean, the thing is Alex Palou had a 23rd last year, which is pretty comparable to 26th and 27th, but he was also, that was limited. That was his only finish outside of the top 15, maybe, last year. So
we're talking about a 2-point difference.
Correct. So it's not that much, but at the same time, I think the more worrisome thing for me, if I'm Penske, is 0 wins through the first 3 races. And you really haven't been close. I mean, Joseph Newgarden at St. Pete, I mean, yeah, he got a third, but I mean, he wasn't going to win that race, I felt like.
No.
So I think that's the bigger thing is A, you have some bad finishes, and B, you're not winning races right now. Now, inevitably, Penske's going to get their wins for sure, but does it come too late? Because not only do you have to avoid consistent bad finishes to win a championship, you have to get wins, multiple wins, if you're going to beat Alex Palou in a championship. And right now, no driver for Penske has a win, and none of them have really been close. And to your point, mentioning it, qualifying has been un-Penske-like.
Yes.
Outside of the pole that McLaughlin got.
It's been a struggle, and when it's a struggle for Will Power, it's noticeable, right? That's the part. And here's the stat on Power. So he's failed to make it out of the first round of qualifying 3 straight times. Oof. The last time he did that was in 2022, where he did it in 4 straight races, Detroit through Toronto. So that's the only other time that has happened.
And I think the biggest thing in not getting out is when they talk to him after not advancing, he doesn't really have a reason why. It's not like, hey, I could have done this. I mean, you look at Long Beach, he kind of started talking about traffic, and he said, but we kind of backtracked and said, well, traffic's the same for everybody. It doesn't seem like at least Will Power can pinpoint and say, yeah, we should have done this or done that. It's kind of, we didn't have it. And that maybe is more concerning, is at least outwardly, they can't pinpoint why the guy who has the most poles in IndyCar history can't even advance out of the first round on these road and street courses currently.
The cars are so similar. I mean, yeah, the shocks or the dampers, whichever way you want to call them, that's a big difference, and there are other small aero bits, but overall, I mean, it's a spec series, right?
Right, yeah.
And for a team to be this befuddled over what's happening in qualifying, which sets you so far back for the race at a track like Long Beach, it's shocking.
Yes.
And not to use a bad pun, but it's shocking.
I mean, you cannot win the championship before Indianapolis, but you can lose it.
Correct.
And Penske is really towing that line to eliminating itself from the championship race before it even heats up.
That is true. Championship talk before Indy.
Well, we're not going to break down the points championship.
I know. I give you a hard time.
But I know. But I think it's sensible to say, hey, the 26th and 26th fifth place finishes mean just as much at the beginning of the season as they do at the end of the season.
Okay, my number 3. Let's talk about Santino Ferrucci. Went from last to 11th. at a track like Long Beach that was green the entire way. And I guess that's the thing I failed to mention about Stingray Robb and Kiffin Simpson. This was a green flag race. 0 cautions.
Right.
IndyCar's gone caution-free in back-to-back races, and essentially outside of Will Power's mistake on lap 1 of St. Pete, it has been caution-free,
all green.
which is crazy. So that it goes to show you, A, how hard it is to move up when you're not benefiting by quick pit stops or strategy that, offsets where you get a lucky yellow. This is hard, fast, green flag racing, and for what Stingray Robb and Kevin Simpson, and also Santino Ferrucci, who, ironically, they all finished 9th, 10th, and 11th. Props to them. And I want to touch on Ferrucci in particular because so far, and this is something I'm going to keep an eye on all year because why not, but he's finished ahead of David Malukas 2 out of the 3 races. Malukas has essentially been a complete non-factor. Now, Foyt as a whole, 0 top 10s, right? So it's not like these are outstanding results, but I think it says something when Ferrucci, who's just known as an oval guy, can go from 27th to 11th at Long Beach in a completely green race. Props to him.
The thing with Malukas is like Roger Penske and Penske Corp and Tim Cindric are much more intelligent than me. However, I expected, and maybe we'll still see it this year, David Malukas having some drives where we can look at it and say, yeah, I understand why Team Penske is eyeing him for a seat as soon as next year in place of Will Power. We haven't seen it yet.
No, I guess that's my point.
To your point, Santino Ferrucci's looking like the better.
Is able to give you those types of drives. I've yet to see it from Malukas this year. It's early. And is it more of a factor of, Honda's won the first 3 races of the year and they've been fairly dominant in doing so? Is that a factor where it's Honda versus Chevy and, Chevy just is not excelling at these kind of tracks? We'll see if that changes for Barber,
right?
Which is normally a more Chevy dominant track in years past. But yeah, with Malukas, look, we focus on looking at Malukas versus Will Power, which is not a fair comparison based on the equipment. But the reality is Santino Ferrucci is overall outperforming David Malukas. It's a slight edge, but it's still an edge.
Well, and I think, too, is you look at David Malukas, who spent his first 2 full seasons, his only 2 full seasons outside of this year, with Dale Coyne. And through 22 and 23 was able to put up routinely some top 10 finishes.
Mm-hmm.
The runner-up finish at Gateway in 22. Then he comes back and finishes on the podium again 1 year later. He had a 4th at Texas. He had a 6th at Mid-Ohio, a 9th at Mid-Ohio, a couple 8th place finishes at Iowa, an 8th at Portland. And all those races are coming up or no longer on the schedule in the sense of Texas. So maybe it comes. But my point is, he was routinely getting 3 or 4 top 10s a year in inferior equipment in Coyne. And yes, 3 races does not a season make, but we would expect David Malukas to have, what would you say, 4 or 5 top 10 drives this year?
Oh, easily. I get that it's
guy that's supposedly
it's a Foyt car where the number 2 car has historically not been great, but this is a different team.
It has to be
this
better
is a
than
ride
Coyne.
Paid for essentially by Penske. I still find it fascinating that there's no sponsorship on that car. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
It just has the AJ Foyt Racing logo.
Yeah, kind of interesting.
So, yes, we know that Penske put Malukas in the ride, and it's essentially this is like a training year, kind of like with Kirkwood at Foyt a couple years ago for Andretti, where Andretti didn't have a spot on the team, and so they farmed him out. Similar to that, not similar in the fact that we knew Kirkwood would be at Andretti in a year, whereas with Malukas, we don't know if he's going to be at Penske next year. I think that's the hope. That's why they're doing it. But all in all, Ferrucci's been, what he did Sunday was impressive. Overall, yeah, that's been mid-pack. But I think with him, some of his better, we haven't done any ovals yet, and he's at a Malukas. I think that says something.
Yeah, it does. And you look at Malukas' finishes, he's never been really good at Long Beach. He's never really been good at Barber that's coming up, and we'll see what he can do. He's never really been good at Indy, quite frankly. He always seems to kind of turn it on the second half of the year, and I think he's going to have to put up with some results if he thinks that Penske's going to give him a shot next year. If he continues to be a non-factor, Penske's going to find somebody else, in my opinion. So he really needs to find himself over the next several races, because he's quickly going to race himself out of a seat, potentially? Or do you think no matter what, he's guaranteed in that seat next year, considering they're financing him?
I'm not willing to commit to anything on that. That is an interesting proposition. We're too early to really.
Yeah.
Let's get to August before we revisit that. But that's an interesting question.
We're not writing him off by any means, but we're going to have to start seeing results, especially to your point, what Santino Ferrucci did on days like Sunday.
Yes, where it was a disaster of a weekend, and then he gets an 11th place finish in a purely green flag race. That says a lot. All right, what's your number 3?
Well, let's talk about green flags. And as you mentioned, one yellow through the first 3 races, including 2 street courses, which is just bonkos to think about.
In a track where they haven't raced at an official race before either.
Correct, with thermal. Now, the old adage is, that's just the level of the driving of the drivers in the cars, the respect, blah, blah, blah. Do you think it's that, or do you think it's with these tracks that have not raced with the hybrid and the clunkiness that we know involves the added weight with the hybrid, these cars just aren't as racy with the extra 100-some pounds? I mean, we know that's a fact, but are we not seeing as many moves being able to be made or challenges to drivers ahead? And that's really taking away from potential issues on track, but also passing on track.
Well, speaking of passing on track, NASCAR man _RR on Twitter/X had this. In these 6 road and street course races since IndyCar introduced the hybrid system last July, so that started at Mid-Ohio, right? There's been only one on-track lead change. All others were through pit stop cycles, and that was Palou passing Pato Award at Thermal this year. That's not a good thing. That's an indictment, that's not just on the hybrid, but just on the package as a whole.
And it's a greater conversation leading into TV ratings and everything. But if you look at road and street courses and the lack of excitement that's going on at the front of the grid, diehard fans like us, we're going to find things to be excited about, whether it's the pageantry of the event, the season starting, battles in the midfield, whatever. But casual fans want to see action at the front of the grid, and if they're not getting that, then other than calamitous wrecks, which they're also not getting, then what is keeping people from watching?
Well, and the quote-unquote casual fan, right? St. Pete had the big boost because of all the Fox Super Bowl promotion and
correct, and it
headlines,
didn't deliver as a race.
And then you look at Thermal and the technical issues, and then Long Beach, the presentation was great. For me as a diehard fan, I enjoyed Long Beach, but I go in not expecting a crazy upfront battle. I mean, last year had good action among the top 3. This year, look, it wasn't a great race. He had good strategy early, but I'm also grading Long Beach on a curve.
True. Because
it's a big event, and I was still entertained. Look, I'll take a race over nothing almost any day of the week. But the quote-unquote casual viewer had a lot of options to choose from, as we'll dive into that too, on Sunday, and maybe that's part of the issue as well. It's scheduling, it's the hybrids, it's
a lot of things,
a lot of stuff, but I think factors into it.
Yeah, but in terms of coming back to my number 3 real quick, and yeah, it's nice, I guess, that we haven't had yellows all over the place. I think a yellow here and there can add immeasurably to the excitement. I felt like a boring race at Bahrain for Formula One was saved with 20 laps to go with a safety car, and then there was a lot of action, maybe not at the front, but a lot in the midfield and for podiums and points and stuff. I just don't know if that's drivers driving well or the fact that they just can't be on the ass of cars as much as they used to be able to with the hybrid.
I think it's more of the latter, where you're just not on the edge, one, because the car is a lot different, just like when they added the aero screen, right? The car was a lot different track to track, and so they're not as familiar. Right. They don't have a baseline setup going in because you add in the weight of the hybrid, and everything's completely different in terms of how the car operates. So I think that's a huge factor, and I think it's just drivers aren't comfortable yet because it's a new experience each time, which, to be clear, it used to be new every year because they had new chassis.
Correct.
And I think if you had more of that, and I get you want to contain costs and everything, but if you want to improve, differences, I'm not saying it'll improve the racing, but in terms of not being spec, that's how you get there. Whether it's different tire choices, which the alternate tire outside of, Stingray Robb and Christian Lundgaard, who had an outstanding race. Again, I think he's been the fact he has adapted so well at McLaren right away, I think says a lot about his talent. But the alternate tires, for the most part, have been an afterthought. So you don't have that factoring in. So you have the hybrid alternates that the drivers don't like so far. And then, I don't know, what else is a factor? Those, to me, are the two biggest
dampers,
things.
I guess.
I guess.
The development. But I think, obviously, the lighter a car is, the more nimble a car is.
Correct.
And the more action or the more
Well, and multiple
moves
drivers said they weren't able to turn in, right? I think Palou said that.
A lot of understeer.
And who was the other driver? Was it Herta who said that too?
I think so. I think he struggled understeer the entire Sunday. But that's the thing, is like if you add weight and don't add significantly more power, of which they haven't, then it's just going to be, and we've heard it ad nauseum, just more tougher and tougher to drive, and also tougher and tougher to make moves. And I think that's part of the reason why we've only seen one caution through 3 weeks, is guys just can't even attempt passes, let alone complete passes. And that's where the majority of your yellows come from, particularly on street courses, is somebody tries to make a move that maybe they shouldn't, or the other driver isn't aware that they're trying, and then something happens. I think the fact that we're not seeing cautions means that's not happening as much on track.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, those are our three things. Other final thoughts from you on Long Beach before we dive into TV stuff?
I really liked the alternate strategy breakdown by Fox, showing the top three running and based on strategy. I thought that was really good and much needed. You mentioned it about the lack of hybrid.
There's nothing.
There's nothing, but
I don't think it's a storyline.
Yeah, you have extra power, but even us as diehards, we're kind of like, whatever.
Like if it's not producing, and it's not producing a lot of game-changing power, like everyone's using the hybrid every lap anyway. Right. So push to pass is more of the story because that's an extra boost.
Right, which we saw a graphic kind of being used on how much
which
time.
I like that kind of little ticker, and it had the time and it'd go down. I thought that was nice.
I just don't know how you look. I do agree that the broadcast focus, and this has been a long time, not just a Fox thing, focuses way too much on tires.
Yes.
But I don't know how you insert the hybrid talk and how you have basically two different pushes to pass and all that. Like
you're going to confuse people.
You're going to confuse the hell out of people.
Yeah.
You can't have so much on the screen, right? And not you need to dumb it down because we're not asking that. But
we love the little hybrid deploy, reploy thing that NBC did, but it was even confusing for us because it's the opposite. You would think green means you're using it. Yeah, but it was green meant you were charging, and then red meant you were so even that was confusing because your mind's playing tricks on you with that.
It's not easily explainable, and you already have a push to pass, so you are effectively have two push to passes that you use two different. It's a lot, and I guess I don't really miss it. If Fox came up with a brilliant way to present it, I'd be down with it, but I don't feel like it's taking
too
anything
busy
away from the show.
On timing and scoring if you add it, in my opinion.
And quite frankly, it's not. Tell me how many on-track passes are happening when people use hybrids, because everybody uses them in the same place all the time, every lap.
You figure out how to optimize it in practice, and you go from there.
It's pretty much like a DRS train. Effectively, everybody's deploying it at the same time, so nothing's happening.
And this is why the team owners don't like it, because it's like we're spending an extra $300,000 per car or something per season.
Well, it was supposed to bring in OEMs. They're supposed to keep Honda. Well, if Honda leaves and you don't bring in any OEMs, then what the hell was the point of the hybrid?
Hey, the positive is Honda's won the first three races, so you think they have to be feeling pretty good.
They have to feel pretty good about on-track results and not so much about who's tuning in and TV.
Yeah, well. True.
Nobody's happy about that.
It does go both ways.
And not least of which is Honda.
For sure. So let's dive into the TV rating.
Well, you teased breaking news.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, so ESPN Mexico, and I had to put this into the Google Translate machine.
Okay.
IndyCar could return to the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez after 19 years with a race in March or April 2026. So there's a little bit more clarification on that.
Could.
Very advanced project. Businessman Ricardo Escoto has the official license for the series in Mexico. And then obviously driver Pato Award and his personal team. Ricardo Juncos apparently not involved, which we did know that. But so basically the update is it could be March or April. We were thinking it would be locked into April 12th, but now late March and mid-April, the tentative date for the race. So it basically sounds like, according to ESPN Mexico, this is for sure moving forward. They add a bunch of other stuff about Mark Miles and conversations, but it looks like everything's happening. And also Ricardo Escoto works with CIE, which is like the promoter for the F1 race or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So it seems like there could be a tie-in there, maybe with a sponsor, because he's also got like a billboard business. And that's why we've seen his son and Pato on billboards in Mexico City. But they'll announce a contract extension with F1. That's expected as well after the NASCAR event. And then obviously IndyCar is going to be in Arlington, Texas, March 13th through 15th. So it looks like, again, looking ahead, and Nathan Brown had this right up a couple weeks ago, but for next year, March 29th is Palm Sunday. Obviously, the following Sunday is Easter Sunday. It's not going to be either of those dates. And then Long Beach is the week after that. So, or a couple weeks after that. So we were thinking April 12th, but now maybe it's March 22nd, where you have it a week after
Long Beach or Arlington.
Arlington, yeah.
Which would make sense if you're down there. You may as well just go across the border. But
all in all, here's another update where it's positive. I get that it's not a huge thing, but this is putting more concrete stuff where it says IndyCar could return, could be held in 2026 at Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez.
I mean, they got to get it done for 2026.
Yeah, March or April.
Thing.
So
just get it done.
All signs, it's another positive sign that this is happening. I get that it's not a massive update, but we know it's not going to be March 29th. We know it's not going to be April 5th. The Masters is, of course, we dive into TV stuff. Masters is April 9th through 12th.
Mm-hmm.
Long Beach is April 19th. So maybe it's right after.
I think that makes sense. Is you go down to Arlington, and that would be kind of cool. Back-to-back weeks with back-to-back new events that should be well attended and event feels. But
then what do you fill in the gaps?
I mean,
there?
I think Thermal is back on the schedule.
Thermal back the 29th
of
March
or earlier.
Or do you have it the 12th where you do Thermal followed by Long Beach?
Maybe because you're out there.
Yeah.
That would be another thing. Hey, while you're out here, when you just do both
kind of
races.
like if you do the same for Mexico City and Arlington back to back.
I think that makes sense, but I think the key is not having multiple 3-week breaks. And I think when you start the season, you need to have another race within 2 weeks.
Yeah, which they will have next year.
They would have, yes. So, but they need to get to Mexico. They need to get to Mexico. It's long overdue.
And here's my thing, and I know we talk about that. Like, if you're doing a race in Mexico City and it happens to fall on April 12th, which is Masters Sunday, that's okay with me because it's not in the U.S. It's a totally different event. Like, if you're IndyCar, you want to make sure that event sells tickets and does well in Mexico. Like, yes, you're a largely domestic series, but just like the event in Canada, it's like you can't work around every conflict. I'm okay with that. Also, just have it earlier in the day. Like, have the race be done by like 4 Eastern.
Yeah, which is kind of tough with the time zones, but I think
it's only Mexico, it's Central Time. So
yeah,
it's
I mean,
not
Mexico they'll show up at 7 a.m. if need be. You know what I mean? So, but I agree. Don't have your race. And Long Beach is what it is. I don't think if you can mess with Long Beach in terms of the timing because there's so much going on that entire weekend. I don't know if it's easy. It's probably not easy to say, hey, we're going to start this race 3 hours earlier next year. Long Beach kind of be like, that's going to be tough because we have XYZ going on. But Mexico, Arlington, you're not going to bat 1,000 avoiding Palm Sunday, which is that's the end of the really big Holy Week in Mexico, right? Mexican Catholics. Not to mention Easter, whenever that falls. Then you have
8th,
Masters
or
weekend.
the 5th, yeah. So it's not going to be March 29th.
I mean,
it's not going to be April 5th. That's a lock.
Yeah. So it's just there's a lot to navigate, and if we want the early season schedule to be as robust as we'd like it, you're not going to avoid every single conflict. Not to mention NASCAR, but minimizing those conflicts should be the goal.
All right. And speaking of conflicts, let's talk about the TV numbers.
Here we go.
552,000 on network television for Fox. Now, if you're following what IndyCar and Fox Sports put out there, you're like, oh, wow, that's great. Numbers are outstanding. The press release that came out,
the average looks fine.
Laughable. But you went from 307,000 on USA Network on cable to 552,000 on network.
So
on
yes,
Fox
it
broadcast.
was up. Up is up.
Up is up. Yes, indeed it is. But here's where it's bad. You barely beat NASCAR trucks on FS1. Xfinity, once again, over 1 million, which I think every race this year has gone over 1 million. F1, nearly 1.3 million. And NASCAR on FS1, in a race that was absolutely atrocious from everything I read on social media, got over 2 million for the spring race at Bristol, which has just become an absolute joke. But Fox Sports PR, to their credit, said facing heavy sports competition, aka final Sunday, the NBA regular season, and of course Masters Sunday, with Rory McIlroy winning, which was very popular,
and Cup
as well, which Cup did finish well before IndyCar even was like halfway maybe through. So if those fans flip over, which they may or may not, 80% increase though over 2024.
Well, it should be. It had all 3 network races,
correct,
right?
Now through 3 races, Fox averaging 895,000 viewers, up 27% over last year. But again, not a fair comparison.
But here's the problem: is we've read and know that the expectation, the hope by all of the team owners was that every race this year would get 1 million plus viewers.
Yes.
That was the expectation. If you gave the team owners that, they felt that will be a big enough jump for us then to go sell and do less business to business sponsorships and actually getting corporations and companies to like traditional sponsorship that you see in NASCAR. That was the goal. The average doesn't matter as much as every race needed to get a minimum 1 million, like Xfinity's getting on CW so far. Mm-hmm. Every race has been over 1 million. So take averages out of it, because we know how the average is screwed.
If you take out the Indy 500, the season average still needs to be over 1 million.
Well, I don't think I think every race needs to get 1 million. I'm not even talking averages.
But I'm saying that's where we're at now, because it obviously didn't happen.
Be, right? So you went from the hope of every race could get at least 1 million to now 2 of the 3 races so far have not even been close to 1 million. And that's a problem.
And you're trending downward.
Significantly. Now, hopefully Long Beach is the lowest that we see this year, but in my opinion, it's a variety of factors. Some people point to the infrequency of the schedule early on. I think, yes, there's a certain element of that. I really look at the fact that you had a lot of people tune into St. Pete, and a lot of casual fans looked at it and said, this is boring racing. And it was a boring race if you didn't know what to appreciate. You and I were excited about the season starting. St. Pete's a great event. It was still
a boring race, though.
It was still a boring race, right? So you have one chance to make a good impression on people that are tuning in, and St. Pete didn't do it. So I think boring racing is having a factor. The traditional things of, nobody knows the drivers, which Fox is trying to
Fox has done a great job at working around that.
But I think by and large, and it was one of the tweets we put out this week, is IndyCar fans are passionate. They're dedicated. We tune in anywhere, everywhere, all the time. The bottom line problem is there's just not enough of us.
We'll tune in on YouTube, on NBC Sports Gold, on
We
Peacock.
will chase the series wherever
on
it goes.
Fox Sports 1, Fox Sports 2, Fox Sports 3, which doesn't exist, Big Fox, Little Fox, NBC, USA Network, CNBC. But yeah, like you said, there aren't.
Did you
enough.
mention NBC Sports Gold?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did. I made sure to say that
You'll
earlier.
see, but that it's a myriad of things, but we cannot discount the fact that the last two races have been sorely disappointing, particularly Long Beach. And I know it's up against other things. I get it, but Long Beach is an event and it's your second biggest race and nobody tuned in.
No Masters excuse next year for Long Beach. So hopefully that rating goes way up in 2026. Now just make sure if you run a race on Masters Sunday, it's earlier in the afternoon. I honestly think this is completely avoidable schedule-wise. Make sure you just work around it.
I mean, Masters, the final round, late in the round and overtime, got comparable numbers to an NFL game.
Yes.
Nothing touches the NFL in the United States, and the Masters flirted with NFL numbers on Sunday, which means, and everybody knows, you don't go up against the NFL. You don't go up against the Masters, right? And Barber's been on Masters weekend previously. Now Long Beach was. It kills you. It absolutely kills you.
And as Nathan Brown of the Indy Star pointed out, attendance was great. Viewership was up because he went from cable to broadcast network. But Long Beach was directly against the Masters in 2023. That was against NASCAR. And in 2022, and on network, both eclipsed 1 million. So I think the Rory McIlroy factor played a huge role in that. But also, when you have the long schedule gaps like IndyCar has had early in the year, there's no momentum built. And I think that's something they got to... It's twofold. It's the schedule is bad. Let's just be honest. The schedule is bad prior to May. They got to condense it and add either add more events or space it out better.
Or start later.
Start later. Yeah.
It just, unfortunately... because everybody said, well, the season's too short. Well, you could argue the season's too long right now.
Based on how many events you have. Yeah.
Right. So you have to start. You have one chance, like I said, to make a good impression, and Daytona does that for NASCAR. People say, well, your biggest event's the first event. Well, they use it to their advantage because everybody tunes in terms of motorsports. A lot of people tune in to Daytona. And it sets the bar. It sets the tone for the season. And hell, they come back the next week and they're racing at Phoenix. Now, you may not care about Phoenix, but you know next week they're racing there, and you may tune in because of after watching Daytona and whatever you like with the biggest of NASCAR event of the season. There is momentum there, and if you have a 3-week break between your first and your second event, and your first event wasn't exciting, you're going to lose a lot of people.
Yeah,
that's exactly what we saw.
Common sense. And Nathan Brown has a good story, IndyStar.com, talking about all of that in terms of losing momentum, calling it a sparse spring schedule. IndyCar wasted its Super Bowl moment. I highly recommend you check that out if you can. But enough ratings talk. Look, we'll hope Barber does better. But again, you're having another long layoff. It can't be much worse than Long Beach, though. So we shall see.
You hope not.
Anything else on Long Beach that we missed or you want to talk about?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered it. It was it's always great at Long Beach. You sent me a text like, just Long Beach always delivers in terms of the atmosphere, and the excitement, in terms of the crowd and feeling like a big deal. The racing isn't always the best. You kind of compare it to Monaco in the sense that it feels great. It's historic. It's not as processional as Monaco. I'm not saying that, but at the same time, it's not the most exciting race on the schedule, but it does deliver in terms of a big time feel. And it's always great to watch the Long Beach Grand Prix. And
it brought out Ben Kennedy, who is with NASCAR at Long Beach.
Oh,
which executives, they attend other, like this is normal stuff. Yeah. Obviously, NASCAR would love to be at Long Beach. Let's not kid ourselves. And Jim Harbaugh was a guest of Arrow McLaren after Pato O'Ward did a bit with the Chargers that they featured on the broadcast. Again, features, right? We are seeing Fox do features. So that was nice.
What a concept.
As well. Okay, that wraps up Long Beach. If you agree or disagree with us on Long Beach, TV numbers, what have you, we'd love for you to interact with us. You can always find us on your favorite social media platforms, whether that is Twitter/X or Instagram. We are IndyCar Podcast on there. On Facebook, just search for New Track Record. You can email us, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com, your questions, comments, concerns. You can support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Thanks to Xavier and others for their support. And as always, download and listen for free on your favorite podcasting platforms, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We start with Rate the Race for the mailbag. And Justin, how would you rate Long Beach?
I had it a 6.5.
Okay, that's where I would go as well. Viewers, or not viewers, our listeners, 7.64 and then a bunch of numbers.
Really?
Higher than I would have guessed.
Now, did they grade on a curve like even we did for it being Long Beach?
Perhaps. I mean, if I were grading on a bigger curve, I would have given it like a 7.
Yeah.
I mean, the first start of the race was interesting with all the strategy, but
sure.
I mean, it looks great on TV,
really
but there just wasn't a lot going on. And that's fine. Like, I don't go into Long Beach thinking we're going to have a bunch of chaos.
No, but at the same time, when you have a race like what we had on Sunday, the last half, you were just really hoping for a yellow.
Yes.
That is something to happen. You know?
That is so true. And it never happened.
No.
It never did happen at all. Mailbag entries, there's a lot to dive into, so let's just start. And you mentioned your tweet about IndyCar fans are dedicated and passionate. There just aren't enough of us, plain and simple. A lot of people with thoughts. Nick Yeoman of IndyCar Radio said, "Hey now, don't be bringing that kind of logic and common sense to the table on social media."
Which is rare for our podcast
yes.
or the Twitter, bringing common sense to things.
Jefferson Kern said, period, it's very NASCAR for F1 fans and very F1 for NASCAR fans. People love IndyCar when they connect with it, but it's hard to get people to make that connection. That is true, and we'll revisit his schedule ideas that he had. Lynn _IndyCar said, yes, we are passionate, and Lynn sent you some IndyCar trading cards from Parkside Cards.
So he sent me a couple framed Scott Dixon cards. Because,
I love that this is a recurring bit.
Lynn is the ultimate Scott Dixon fan, and I am the ultimate Scott Dixon detractor to some people.
Not a hater, just a detractor.
Also, by the way, I just have to throw this in there. The Scott Dixon in his prime does not hit the wall like he did at Long Beach in practice.
Ooh, yeah, that was bizarre.
That reinforced my belief that Scott Dixon, while very good, has slipped. And Will Power almost did it, but Scott Dixon just effectively destroying his side of the car.
And Will Power is the one who kind of created that entry point.
Right. I mean,
for Long Beach years ago.
It's all about, where you put the car and that is exhibit A to me, saying that Scott Dixon is slipping because Scott Dixon in his prime doesn't make that mistake. But anyway,
still top 5.
Yes,
without a doubt.
Yes. But anyway, I am now part of the unofficial Scott Dixon fan club, courtesy of Lynn, and I prominently have my cards displayed in my office at work. So I appreciate the goodwill gesture. Look, Scott Dixon's one of the greatest drivers of all time. I'm not fighting that whatsoever, but
you're saying he's a legend?
Yeah, I think he's a legend.
I'm saying that, right?
I know.
If you're a long-time listener,
if Tony Kanon's listening, maybe he'll have something to say about it. But in terms of being now an unofficial member of the Scott Dixon fan club, or the unofficial Scott Dixon fan club, I am very excited and look forward to all the perks that come with that throughout the calendar year.
SCTJ9 said, fact. Brady BC3, 2 years ago, I was more concerned about race attendance and TV numbers. Now they're setting record attendance at seemingly each race. Just keep promoting, putting out a good product, and the viewers will come.
Putting out a good product. Is IndyCar putting out a good product right now?
That's the part I find questionable. Bell to Bell said, I've been doing my best to spread the word about IndyCar. It deserves more eyes on the product. And Tommy the Treat 01 said, yes, we are. We just want what's best for the sport we love, which is true. We're passionate fans. Look, we want success, but it's pretty tough. Elsewhere on the mailbag, some schedule thoughts from Snarky Moose, S2000_Moose. A couple scheduling ideas. Said a day-night doubleheader with Formula E at Homestead on Masters Sunday. Formula E race on the Roval last weekend. You have Indy qualifying on Friday, Formula E Saturday during the day, IndyCar on the Oval at night. Just takes a check. Look, IndyCar needs an Oval prior to Indy. I'm firmly of that belief, and I think that's another schedule gap that is not being met.
Totally agree. I don't know if that's an option. I don't know how easy it is to configure, because they were on the Roval, right, of Homestead, or they were.
Yeah, it was on the Roval.
So I don't know how easy it is to reconfigure that, but I don't think. Here's the thing: is I don't think there were tons of people at the Formula E race, but Formula One isn't needing as much money as IndyCar does.
No, they have a lot of manufacturers.
Yeah, and they have a lot of manufacturers. So
and they're a global series.
Formula E can go and race in front of, I don't know how many people were there. What do you say? 8,000 maybe?
If that, probably.
IndyCar can't afford to go to a place and race in front of so little people.
Now talking about the lack of momentum and the early season schedule, talking about ratings and whatnot, and you said, are we ignoring perhaps the core problem that the series and races just aren't very alluring to casual sports or even racing fans?
Yes.
Hunter J. Smith, though, 3 said, we've been watching the same race since 2012, basically.
It's a decent point.
And then Tipsy_Cart said, it's 2025, not 1991 anymore. The average individual seeking entertainment has unlimited options on a typical weekend.
Yeah. I think the core... We've always talked about growing the IndyCar base of fans. And is IndyCar adding to that base of fans, or is it relying on trying to get the casual viewer? I think it's the latter. And when you have other stuff going on, you're not going to get those casual viewers over NASCAR, over NCAA tournament, over the Masters, right?
Yeah. Snarky Moose. Except for one event a year, IndyCar is not a strong enough attraction to compete with any sports program more significant than bowling. It's just the way it is today. Beginning in 2026, the race dates have to be tailored around competition to get a bigger audience. In concert with that date planning, the events need to be more compelling so that people who are exposed to the product during these more favorable dates will choose to return. It's going to take time, but it needs to start now. Dates for 2026, like we said. And Lynn chipping in, schedule's horrible at the beginning of the year. 3-week gap that happens 3 times. You can't build a new audience with that schedule. Other issues, schedule against the Masters, NASCAR, and March Madness, that doesn't help. And he said last one is below. Yeah, when you have a dominant driver, that doesn't help. Tyler_Allen, story of IndyCar needs to change. We can embrace heritage, but we also need to attract the average viewer 2025. Give them a reason they can't miss it. Part of it is tech, part storytelling, part identity. We need to make drivers, cars, and events larger than life again. And that's what F1 has done. But that's the Drive to Survive effect. I think that
correct.
But they've maintained the audience better than I ever would have guessed.
It's amazing what Formula One has been able to do, and you have to feel that it only gains a decent amount of following, or at least it's not going to lose any following in the United States once Cadillac is involved next year.
Correct. Transocean Trojan said, I don't know, at this point, F1 racing is actually crap compared to IndyCar, but they manufacture drama, and the tech exotic locales help build mystique, I guess. Never got the NASCAR hype, to be honest. Guess it's biased, but open wheel cars are so much better than stock cars, in my opinion. Indy Oreo, John Oriovitz. Double-edged problem. It apparently isn't resonating with a younger audience, and it doesn't interest traditional fans either. Big Mike G. Wood 12 partially feel that the marketing was a tad bit misleading in a way. Fox basically sold the idea that speed was a major draw, yet we went to 3 tracks where speed isn't a big emphasis, and it's not going to be until mid-May.
I thought that was a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
Is you hype up fastest racing on earth, and you have a bunch of street courses and road courses to start the year.
And then IndyCar Man said they can't dumb it down enough to get NASCAR numbers, and won't spend enough on the cars to get F1 numbers. Add 200 horsepower, stop closing the pits and bunching the field. Just go be 1980s IndyCar, stop trying to be NASCAR. Bring back grid girls and speed. It's not complicated. I don't think they're going to bring back grid girls, but the other ideas are interesting, and we'll get to what Will Buxton had to say in terms of the
engine formula.
Yeah, engine formula. You know, if F1 keeps kicking the can down the road
on V10s,
IndyCar can step in, do V8s, V10s, have sheer power, have that at Indianapolis, the roar, the visual, the spectacle. The spectacle's already there, but just adds to it. IndyCar can step in. Now, are they going to do that? Of course not. We know they're not going to do that, but that's an opportunity.
Well, and don't forget too, when we're throwing stones at IndyCar, that I think a perfect race to go to, which we've seen it in the recent past, is going to Texas early in the season. And I would put it smack dab. I'm sorry, I'd put it before St. Pete. And I don't care if there's only 10,000 people there. 10,000 actually would be good compared to what they were drawing. But remember, IndyCar tried to get Texas Motor Speedway on board. But since the passing of Eddie Gossage, Texas Motor Speedway is not interested. So when we talk about finding ovals, IndyCar tried Phoenix. Didn't work.
Your other option is Homestead.
Or
do you somehow pull a rabbit out of the hat and have a spring race at Rockingham now that it's back?
I don't know if that for a couple works. Years. I think Rockingham would be really, when you're talking about an area of the country that IndyCar is not in, that traditionally draw, when you look at top 5, top 10
It's a short oval, which is good for IndyCar.
Yes.
The capacity's perfect, 32,000 roughly. I know they have Xfinity here this weekend, and it's sold out, is my understanding, or
is
at
it,
least
so
close
Cup's
to.
Not? Oh, I guess they wouldn't be on Easter weekend, but yeah, Rockingham would be interested, and maybe if they get a couple races under their belt after the revamp of Rockingham, they'd be interested. But I mean, if you're gonna tease fastest racing on earth all winter, you have to kind of deliver a race that shows that. And I think a big oval. I think Texas. I mean, do you rent Texas and have a race? I don't know.
I mean, Penske promotes half the schedule. I mean, they're renting Iowa. They're essentially in partnership renting Milwaukee. So
maybe they even said we'll rent Texas, and the track still wasn't interested. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of options, but you need to have an oval before May. I'm fully committed. I wasn't worried about that so much before, but I think that much is clear based on the results we've seen so far. You can't say, like you said, fastest racing on earth and not have an oval before May.
No. Or at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
Oh, fastest racing on earth, I'm going to tune in. All they're doing is going 110 miles an hour down a street. And I know they hit greater speeds. What I'm saying in terms of average speed, like they're not hitting 220, 230, 240.
They're not even hitting 200 at Long Beach.
No. So that's tough. People tune in. Oh, fastest racing on earth. I'm going to tune into St. Pete and see what it's all about. Well, not only is it not exciting racing, they're not even going that fast. So
and again, the cars have been it's been the same car essentially since 2012. That's a factor.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot. Couple other things in the mailbag before we move on. We had so many entries, I can't even get to all of them that we had for this week.
Good active week on the Twitter.
Yes, for sure. This from last week. Jeff Cerneski, disappointing that Catherine Legg could not find a team for the Indy 500. She brought an amazing sponsor that engaged with a new fan base. The ALF tent was one of the busiest sponsor displays of the 500 last year. It still makes me upset.
Yeah, you went on
it was a loss and a mistake by IndyCar.
Fail. And I don't even know IndyCar. I mean, it sounded like IndyCar tried to partner with teams and couldn't find one. Now, I would hope if there was a spot open on a Penske team that Penske would have stepped up. But the fact of the matter is Honda was the only team to step up with an engine.
Yeah, well, because Chevy was full.
Correct. So I don't know. I don't know if I blame IndyCar as much as you look at kind of the team owners, but then the team owners are going to come back and say, racing against each other. But ELF and their activation last year was
hey, she'll be racing in Mexico City before IndyCar.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely.
Find that fascinating. And then this from run_mark_run. Me, Caleb, calling you Mach-E a sweet vehicle is probably the most offensive thing I've ever heard on your show.
I think they're not. I think they're cool cars, I guess. I don't know.
Apparently we're the wrong.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I will say the Chevy Corvette E-Ray that I saw earlier this year, matte black E-Ray at Kelly Chevrolet, Tom Kelly, former IndyCar team owner. Only $132,000, but I would take that over what we were talking about last week. So hopefully that brings us back into the good graces. I think it's a nice car, but the E-Ray is just absolutely phenomenal.
And then that shifts into a couple of emails, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. This from Joe talking about the hybrid. Hey guys, wanted to add to your hybrid discussion from last week. As someone who works in the EV auto industry, I completely agree with your assessment that hybrids in racing are starting to lose their appeal with OEMs. The goal of the hybrid in a road car and a race car are fundamentally different, at least in IndyCar, road car being to increase fuel mileage, and race car to increase power. My impression is that the development path for each has been relatively similar so far, but at a certain point, the two paths will likely diverge, at which point I can totally see OEMs not being interested in racing hybrids anymore. We may be approaching that point, and of course, it's right as IndyCar gets into the hybrid arena. Appreciate your insight as always.
That's a great email. We appreciate it too, because getting the insight, and he's right, and kind of dumbing it down for us dullards is, yes, when you talk about hybrids, when you talk about electric cars, it's all about, gas mileage or fuel mileage. And I talked about the E-Ray it is combined electric and gas. So, but you're still getting performance out of that, but a lot of it has to do with the ICE up front, right? So when you're looking at that, and we know that hybridization has been a big thing in IMSA, but when we look forward, you have Formula One with Formula E. There's still discussions about NASCAR having an EV series at some point, but NASCAR or IndyCar is not at that point where it's going to have a separate electric or alternative energy series or anything like that. So I think
within 5 years, we're there by 2030, if not earlier.
I think you're seeing the signs already.
Yes.
I mean, we read about it as OEMs aren't really as interested in hybrids. I think they're looking at it and say, we want to get back to mega performance. And that's why they've been kind of throwing around V10s in Formula One, is getting back to pure performance and not really worried about hybrid tech because, and maybe to a certain extent, okay, we've perfected it by 2025 in the sense that we know what direction we're going on the road in the road cars. 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was still kind of, hey, we're still figuring out this technology. So I do think a diverge has happened, if not happened yet, is coming in terms of where racing goes and where road cars go.
And then this from Jen. Hello, my name is Jennifer, a new listener, sending in an email question for the mailbag. Fellow IndyCar fan in Fort Wayne, so hello. Curious about your thoughts on Penske's recent struggles and horrible qualifying performances. Obviously, we touched on that earlier, but yeah, it's baffling. I guess that's my final thought. It's baffling.
It is absolutely baffling. They've had a race here or there where you're like, whoa, but this is 3 races where they have 1 pole and not showing pace. And I think more the biggest to me is Will Power not getting out of Q1 3 straight races. That's just insanity. Yeah. I mean, there was a point not too long ago where him not making the Fast 6 was insanity, and now he can't even get out of Q1. So I don't know what it is, and we're going to see if it continues into Barber here in a couple weeks. But welcome aboard, Jennifer. We appreciate you listening. And anytime we talk about the trials and tribulations of the weather in Fort Wayne, we know at least one person listening can relate.
Yes, so true. All right, let's get to news and notes, and let's rifle through this as quickly as we possibly can. I'm just going to go from furthest back to most recent to make that even quicker. Graham Rahal looking to establish a scholarship fund to help young talent overcome financial hurdles associated with climbing through the junior ranks. That from racer.com. Good on Graham for that. If you missed it over the weekend, Tim Cindric is going to join Kevin Lee and Jack Harvey as a guest analyst in the series formerly known as Indy Lights booth for Barber Motorsports Park.
Man, that's another, maybe not as talked about, and yeah, it's not as important, but I mean, Next hasn't raced since St. Pete.
Correct.
Damn. Jesus.
Racer and IndyStar both covered about putting IndyCar officiating into hands of an outside party. No plans to make that change, though. It is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it as, I get it. I understand why some teams would want it. I don't know. I haven't seen the egregious calls going not against Penske or for Penske that there's been inconsistency in calls forever in IndyCar, right? So yes. I don't think Penske owning anything is a big deal, at least right now.
Great news. Racing Electronics will be back at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I am so excited for this. They've been gone a couple years, so they're coming back, which means I will probably want to split a scanner rental with someone in our group. But this is good. This is a good thing. They already have it up on their link, so just RE Radio Z on Twitter /X. I'm sure they're Racing Electronics everywhere on social media. You can look up, but finally, about time.
How long has it been gone?
Several years. I think the last year, was it 21?
Okay.
Was it 19? I mean, it's been a while.
And you've had no other options for scanners after
Not that I can think of. For rental, no, I don't think so.
Week.
It's been a bit.
And that's one of the most common questions that I know.
Because it was Racing Electronics, and there was another brand, right? And the other brand basically went away.
Right.
Is that my
And it was only 1 or 2 and done, I think, at Indy.
Yeah.
So glad to have them back.
And speaking of the Indy 500, Ryan Reinbold and Ryan Hunter-Ray announced that the number 23 entry in partnership with Cusick Motorsports will be sponsored by Wedbush, client-driven financial services provider, global reach, committed to delivering tailored solutions to meet the needs of its clients and offering world-class execution services and strategic insights through deep financial expertise. And it goes on and on and on. I don't know what any of this means.
What any of that means.
But he has a primary sponsor.
That's your classic business-to-business relationship for a sponsor.
Founded in California. So, also continuing on with Indy 500 news, Rob Gronkowski will be the Grand Marshal of the Indy 500 Snake Pit.
I can think of no better
choice
to be in the Snake Pit than Rob Gronkowski.
Pretty awesome. Felix Rosenquist has a partnership with Texas A&M University for the season. I believe
I saw that
on the top of his helmet.
Yeah, and I think it's across in NASCAR too, I think.
Yes, I think so.
Cool for the sponsor.
Yes, so that's cool. Nathan Brown had a good article at IndyStar.com talking about taking his 3-year-old son to the new IMS museum, and that experience basically it got a thumbs up from his son. I think that's the key takeaway, that it's more kid friendly. I think that was the issue before. Indy 500 street signs are going up now. We'll have a nice tweet of the week on that. The rules for Kyle Larson and Tony Kanaan, basically Tony Kanaan has to take part in a refresher test the first day of practice, use a set of tires, and then if he is basically it's all in. If Larson's all in on Sunday, he obviously keeps his starting spot. If he's out, then Kanaan can start as long as he passes the refresher. He'll start from the back. Now, if Larson is out and then decides to want to come back in, he also will have to start last. That's the key explanation here. To dumb it down and make it simple.
It's basically contingent on the weather. If the race starts on time, Larson will start and then retire the car. If it rains, if it starts late, then Kanaan will start in the car.
But there's no relief driver.
No, you can't just come in and jump in. Nope.
Correct. So that's the easiest way to understand it. And we go from that to the IMS Open Test, which is coming up April 23rd and 24th. So that is next Wednesday and Thursday. We will record next week on Friday again, just working with my schedule. I'll tell you after, but it has to be then because of my schedule. But 34 entries, all of them. Everything will be streamed on YouTube, on the IndyCar YouTube channel. The schedule for Wednesday is 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., 9:30 to 5 p.m. on Thursday. Wednesday, they'll have a veteran session, 10:05 to noon. Rookie orientation refresher test, noon to 2. All skate from 2 to 6. Then on Thursday, 9:30 to noon, will be a high boost session.
Ooh.
So that's fun. Like Fast Friday, 2 to 5 as well. So they'll have the Southeast Vista Grandstands, Turn 2 viewing mounds open as well. Parking will have to be across the street due to the museum changes. All 34 entries expected, again, on the IndyCar YouTube channel. And also, of note, Alan Bestwick and James Hinchcliffe will be on the coverage for that. So it won't just be static and car sounds. You'll have... and nice. Georgia Henneberry will be back doing interviews in the pits. So they have a full presentation, so that's good.
That's going to be on YouTube?
Yes, the IndyCar YouTube.
Okay, nice. Now, we're going to see Georgia Henneberry maybe starting at Indy?
I think at Barber.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
Nice.
So But yeah, that's the schedule. So we'll obviously have that to break down next week. So plenty to discuss as we've run so long this week. I need to wrap things up.
I know, I'm texting. Long story short, I was supposed to get Noah a while ago. But he's fine.
Here we go. Well,
he's at home. It's fine.
Okay. We will figure this out. So possible schedules. I mentioned Jefferson Kearns at St. Pete, March 1st. Arlington, March 15th. That's locked in. Thermal could be March 29th. Mexico could be April 12th. That was the AP date. Long Beach, April 19th. And Alabama, May 3rd. That could be the early season schedule for IndyCar next year. Perhaps. We shall see. And then a sad note, Larry Henry, who worked for the IMS Radio Network 1981 to 1995, worked on the backstretch, then moved to turn 3. In 89, he called the battle between Little Al and Emerson Fittipaldi.
Tough to see. He meant a lot to a lot of different people and a lot of different disciplines. So
also was a co-host with Donald Davidson for a time on Talk of Gasoline Alley.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Obviously, an iconic call between Little Al and Emerson Fittipaldi. Yep. All right, tweets of the week. Will Buxton, as I continue my education in American culture, a public service announcement that despite being stored with the candy, softies are not to be eaten are in fact earplugs. Found this out the hard way.
So they come in little bags of 2, right? So he has to tear open the little bag and they just popped them in his mouth.
Yeah.
Because the picture shows it's just a right around.
Yeah, I mean, if you're unfilliar, you're like, are these mini circus peanuts?
Right? Yeah, oopsies, but that's hilarious.
Colton Herta. IndyCar posted its NCT data race winner prediction, and it was Colton Herta, and Herta replied, "Stop picking me for this." I thought that was outstanding.
Maybe he even said that to you, too. Stop picking me to win races.
Probably. Meanwhile, the actual winner, Kyle Kirkwood, or Kirk Kirkwood, the headline in a newspaper was Kirk Kirkwood bests Alex Palou at Long Beach, and Kirkwood posted the screenshot and said, "Oh no, not this again." Long-standing joke that's continued to go on in IndyCar. Couple other tweets. Kiffin Simpson, if I was racing the Indy 500, I wouldn't tell anyone, but there would be signs, and it was him putting up his Indy 500 street sign. And then this from Tony D. Indy, saying you gained 200,000 viewers from last year when last year was on USA Network and not against the Masters is a huge cop-out. And then this from Nathan Brown to wrap up everything. Someone replied to him, based on what I'm seeing, momentum's growing. Parking and camping at Indy is sold out 3 weeks sooner than 24. Ticket sales, high have they been since 2016, the 100th anniversary? And Brown said, momentum and casual fans' interest in the 500 is through the roof. Not a question. They may have 350,000 people at the race, an average of 6 million watching from home. But the sport is more than that one weekend.
And I think that needs to be told to fans, to Penske Corp, to everybody involved in IndyCar and I think to a certain extent they're trying, but try harder. It has to be bigger than one race.
Anything that we missed, we covered a lot, and this is a marathon episode.
We did, but I think per usual, we put together a banger of a show.
All right, random splitter driver of the week.
All right, so we're going to 2005 in kart and going with Fabrizio Del Monte, an Italian racing driver from Latina Lazio, Italy, apparently.
Never heard of this driver.
Fabrizio Del Monte raced 3 races in Champ Car. He drove for 3 seasons in European Formula 3000 and drove 3 Champ Car events in 2005, often on the strength of sponsorship. In 2005, he started Long Beach for Jensen Motorsport and finished 16th. And then for HVM Racing, he did raced in Surfers Paradise and Mexico City, apparently. Even though I don't see
not just
finish.
HVM, but CTE Racing HVM, which is not the brain concussion,
not the brain concussion
injury, but Cedric the Entertainer.
Yes, which is just as big of a story, I think, than that Cedric the Entertainer was in IndyCar, or at least kart. This is interesting. He had secured Midland's 3rd driver's seat for the 2006 San Marino Grand Prix in Formula One. That was when teams... Were you always allowed to run up 3, or just occasionally could run 3?
I'm not sure. I don't remember that far back.
But now, of course, you can only race 2. He said that plan fell through due to lack of sponsorship. His place was taken by Giorgio Mondini. Damonte was also to be the team's third driver in the Hungarian Grand Prix, and that fell through as well. So never did start a Formula One race, and only started two, and I don't see him in Mexico City, in 2005.
Yeah, it looks like Long Beach and Surfers, and that's it.
That's it. So that was it. 2 and done for Jensen Motorsport and HVM Racing. And that's pretty much it. There's a very little information on Fabrizio Del Monte, born December 5th, 1980. So he is, 45 years old? So he was very young when he
was
Champ Car. But yeah, this week's Random Splitter Driver of the Week, little known Fabrizio Del Monte.
All right, for Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. We'll be back next week to recap the IMS Open Test. The Boost.
Let's go.
Back. The Boost is back on New Track Record Podcast.